A good life is a life built around fulfilling work, play, relationships, and lifelong learning. Welcome to Good Life Conversations, where we explore the stories and strategies of inspiring everyday people who are striving to create a life of purpose, meaning, and connection. Hi there, welcome to this Good Life Conversation. My name is Jay. I am the founder of Discover Year and the host of this conversation. So today's guest is Sabrina McTaggart. Welcome, Sabrina.
Thank you, Jay. It's a pleasure to be here.
And Sabrina is a career coach for young adults, and she has her own enterprise, her own business. She's been doing this for quite some time. And we have known each other for, we were just saying before we started recording, for quite a long time. We're unsure of exactly how long, as is often the case, but it's probably been close to 10 years, maybe 7 or 8 years.
Yep.
And when we met, I connected so much to what Sabrina was doing, and a lot of the elements of our work overlap. The work that we do at Discover Year, Sabrina does a lot of that work with her clients, young adults, and helping them understand what a meaningful career might be for them, and helping them take action to go out and find that. So, thanks again for being here, Sabrina. And we always like to start with a question to hear a little bit about your day. So, if you can tell us a day in the life of Sabrina, what time do you get up? Do you have any morning routines? How much time do you spend working during the day? And if you want a little bit of the nature of that work, how do you wind down? What time do you go to bed? Take us through a typical day, if you don't mind.
Okay. Well, I am self-employed and I run my own business, so I have a lot of autonomy, which I love. But I do like to loosely hold a routine. I would say I'm an early riser. So early riser is 6 o'clock, 6:30. Um, and that whole concept of do the important things first. Well, for me, making sure I am physically fit is super important. So getting my workout in, well, first I eat breakfast, but then after that, it's getting that workout in. So I'm a cross-country skier, I'm a runner, I'm a biker. I like to lift weights, I like to stretch. So I'm pretty lucky. I've got like just a home gym in my basement and with a bunch of equipment down there, or I will head out with friends and ski and bike or something. But yeah, I like to get that done first because it's super important. And I know myself well enough that as the day ticks by and it's 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and I haven't fit my workout in, and often there's just too many reasons not to do it. So put the big rocks in first, that saying. So yeah, and then I get ready for my day, which is typically answering a bunch of emails. And, email is really central to my business because I'm replying to inquiries from people who are interested in my services. So a lot of back and forth on that. And then a good portion of my day is meeting with my clients. And I work as Jay said, as you said, I work as a career coach to teens and young adults. So what do I mean by that? I'm helping young people begin to define their career path, understand the process of career exploration, career development, career management, and what do I need to do to achieve those goals, and just getting pointed in the right direction. So that's a good portion of my day, is meeting with my clients. And like I said, because I'm self-employed, I have a lot of autonomy, but I am at the point in my career where I really try not to see clients after 5:30, and there's a reason for that. It's because I'm not at my best. I want to give all of my energy and attention to my clients, and I know the way my energy ebbs and flows. I'm better at the beginning part of the day than seeing clients into the evening, so I just don't do that. And in the evenings, I love to make healthy food. It's a super high priority to me to nourish myself and my family well. So I would say there's a big focus on making super healthy food. And then the evening is connecting with friends, reading my book, connecting with my husband, getting outside, working in my garden. Yeah, and then in the evenings it's not uncommon for me to do a bit more work, and I'm happy to do that. Just sometimes a lot of my clients, busy parents, will reply to their emails in the evenings, and it's best to just respond to those right away. And I'm not at all resentful of that. I don't mind that at all. And then maybe I'd wind down the evening watching a bit of Netflix with my husband, and then tipping into bed, I'm not gonna lie, pretty early, like 10 o'clock, read a few pages of my book, and then I am out. Yeah, so that's a typical day for me.
That's great. That's great. I'd love to hear a couple follow-up, have a couple follow-up questions if that's okay. This idea of time and when you have more energy and more perhaps brain power and less, how did you come to understand that, and how long did it take you to understand it and also to act upon it?
Yeah. It ties into it's a really important concept to, when do I have the most energy? What kinds of work are suited to different parts of my day? And it's a great segue into the whole understanding of career exploration, because it's really knowing yourself. It's really tuning into, paying attention to, it's the whole self-knowledge, self-awareness, self-reflection. Like, tuning into those things about yourself, and at the risk of sounding really woo-woo, it's honoring those things about yourself. It's really honoring and respecting them and not dismissing them. Like, maybe it's not me, but maybe you are a night owl. Maybe someone does their best work, in the wee hours of the morning, and respecting that and honoring that. So I think it's just paying attention to myself and understanding it. And, you know, you learn from your mistakes. And when I try, I'm in a time crunch and I've got something important that has to be done, and I'm trying to do it at 9 o'clock at night, and I'm miserable and I'm unhappy and I don't feel like I'm doing my best work, then it's to hit the pause button and say, okay, girlfriend here, what have you learned about yourself and how are you going to do things differently? And spoiler alert, from someone who's like into many decades of their life, you are constantly doing that. Like, it never ends. But I will say, that is the joy of getting older, is you do know yourself better, you do understand yourself better. So I would say that to all the young people who might be tuning into this, is don't ever let anybody tell you that getting old is a bad thing, that aging is a bad thing. It just gets better. So yeah.
That is hopeful. That is hopeful. My achy body is telling me I'm unsure of that, but I totally hear what you're saying. I think there are benefits and there are drawbacks.
For sure, for sure. Yeah.
But I like how you framed that. Sorry. And I guess what I'm curious about here is, and I love, by the way, that you said that this is an ongoing pursuit of refining how you do that, and that's the thing that all of our mentors, in one way or another, share, is that, hey, this is not just something you package up, it's done, you've accomplished it, you know yourself, and you're moving on. It's a lifelong pursuit. So that's a message that carries from one episode here to the other. I'm curious to hear a little bit about this idea. You said, hey, sometimes I email in the evenings, have a little bit of work to do. And you were very specific to say you don't resent that. And I'm curious, why did you add that and why do you not resent it?
I think it's because I would say that as a self-employed person who works from home, I have a home office, the boundary between my work and my home life is blurry sometimes. And some people deal well with that. I do. I don't mind that blurry line between work and home, but I do know other people who say, I just need a clear separation
Mm,
between work and home. Um, I will also say that, and I really have to work hard not to get too Pollyanna, rose-colored glasses about this, but I was clear to say I'm not resentful about it, because it underscores how much I love this work. Like, I'm going on 10 years now, and it just is continues to be a joy, and it's worth hunting that down.
yeah, I love that. Great. And no surprise, I totally agree with you. And there is this balance that we're trying to help our students think about and learn, which is you can love something and also be very frustrated by parts of it. Like you said, in our conversation before we started recording, no one will ever love every single thing about their
Mm,
job, but there will be joy and satisfaction, fulfillment. And then sometimes that comes with things that we like less. But it's this balance of being, pursuing the things that's motivating enough for us to get over the humps or the things that we enjoy a bit less.
yeah, absolutely.
That's great. And I'm with you right there too, with I'm totally fine with blurring the boundaries. And I've learned that about myself. And I found it confusing when I met people who were so rigid about clarifying work and personal life. And that's, there's been some research in psychology around that. And I think the important message is that a lot of young people are bringing with them the ideas that their parents and others around them have shared about their own, the parents' personalities or the teachers' personalities. And the students that we meet often will bring those and they'll say, this is who I am. And it's pretty easy for me and probably for you to say, well, is that really who you are? Or is that maybe what you've heard about? So
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear this. I think is a segue into your progress into adulthood and your education and how you became a career coach, career counselor. So I think people would be interested to hear that you didn't study this at all when you were young, when you came out of
Oh,
high school. Can you tell us a little bit about your meandering journey?
yeah, absolutely. I love this story, and I hope it's helpful to somebody. I grew up in a family where education was highly valued. My dad is an immigrant, and so it was all about getting as much school as you could. And my dad was a real intellectual snob. He told me from a very young age that he was pretty sure I should be a scientist. And he said to me, you don't want to be a doctor. Doctors, they just deal with like broken bones and the common cold. He said, what you want to do is do your PhD in science. And this was a long time ago. And he said, you should probably do it in genetic engineering because we're on the cusp of some really great things. And he was right, it's amazing that he knew that way back so long ago when I was in grade school. But so all the way through my elementary years, like as young as being like 6, 7 years old, he told me I was going to be a scientist. And I was a good girl. I was a hard worker. I liked school. So in high school, we had 3 maths back then. I took all the maths, all the sciences, worked really hard, shipped off to Queen's University and did life sciences. So my courses were physics, chemistry, biology, and then they just got harder and harder. It was anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, organic chemistry. And you know how I talked a few minutes ago about paying attention and noticing things about yourself and honoring things about yourself? I will say through all my years at Queen's, when it came to my coursework, my schoolwork, I was not doing that and I regret it. So I was taking all these courses in, like, I do think school is supposed to challenge you, but I was taking courses that were not interesting to me, that I did not have an aptitude for. And the courses that I did take that really resonated with me, and I was getting super high marks in, and I was reading ahead in the textbook, were all of my psychology courses. And what I should have done was said, okay, let's slow things down here. Let's take a pause, maybe reach out to some of the resources that are available to me in this university, like speaking to an academic advisor. I didn't do any of that. I'm a persevering person. I put my head down.
Mm,
I, I should have questioned, I should have had an honest conversation with my dad about what I was pursuing. But instead, I basically just lived in the library. I put my head down and I just gritted my teeth. It was just grit that got me through 4 years of university.
mm,
And it's a shame because, university or college should be a time when you're studying something that is not that it's not going to be hard, because it's supposed to be hard by definition, but it should be something that inherently you just find interesting. Not every single course. You're not going to love every single course, but the general direction of what you're studying should be something that I want to talk about this. I want to read about this. I want to learn more about this. And I did not have that experience
mm,
whatsoever. So you grow up a lot when you're in those post-secondary years. I reach the end of my university years, and I come to the complete understanding that I am not going to be a scientist. I am not going to be a doctor.
mm,
But the terrifying reality was I had no clue what my career direction was going to be. And I had a big student loan to pay off. So I was really in a big panic. So I went to student services. I needed a job and I needed one fast. I went to student services, and I had had a summer job at university where I did some selling. And so I got hired by a big multinational pharmaceutical company. So I was 22 years old. They came to Queens. They packed up all my stuff. I moved to Ottawa, and on my first day of work, they delivered me a brand new car, great big Buick Regal. And I was paid this big salary. And my job was to drive around to all the family doctors and try to get them to use my drug. And as it turned out, doctors just like talking to someone who's not sick and injured and miserable and complaining. And I show up with donuts and a smile on my face, and we would just talk about all kinds of stuff, and they would prescribe my product, and my sales went up and up and up. So they want to reward their good salespeople. And so to reward them, I got sent every year on this incredibly luxurious vacation. This in the middle of February, like right now, I got sent on these with all the other high achieving salespeople, these luxurious vacations. So on paper, it all sounds good. Big salary, car, gas paid for, insurance paid for. My boss is super happy with me because I'm selling, I'm doing my job, and my sales are going up, and I get these trips. On paper, it looks amazing. Inside, I am absolutely miserable. And I was not, and all of my friends at the time, we're all young, we're in our 20s, and all of my friends are looking at my situation saying, "What's wrong with you? Like, you've the best job." I could not figure out why I was so unhappy. And it took a lot of work and struggle and reading and more reading to try to figure it out. And that's a message I'd really like to communicate to people, is to young people in particular, is it's worth fighting for. Like, I can get a little bit evangelical about this, but if you're not happy in the work you're doing, don't be complacent. Like, it's worth, you have to be relentless in hunting it down. And it's a fine line, because you're not looking for the perfect job. I don't believe that exists, but there is a better fit job. And yes, you're finding that balance. You don't want to job hop, you want to give it a chance. But on the other hand, if you know and you trust your intuition, this is not a good job fit for me, something is wrong here. And I bet, Jay, in your life, you've had a job where it was like, something's not right here. Like, I can't stay here. I cannot be true to myself and stay here. I can see the look on your faces telling me that you have had that experience and you did something about it. You took action. And that's a phrase I like to use, is have a bias for action of doing something about it. Yeah.
Yes, I very much have one story in particular that comes to mind. When I was young, and I feel so fortunate to have worked 2 days at a car wash where we were washing people's cars. If the young people out there can imagine, you used to drive in and 8 people were washing your car, and you do the same thing 50 times a day. And I was so exhausted, and my mom saw that in my face. And then I got a job as a whitewater rafting guide 25 kilometers from our house, way harder objectively in every possible measure. And I adored it. And I learned when I was 17, 18 years old that was possible to love work. And that was
Yeah.
such a useful thing for me. And I'm so happy that I had the experience. And so I connect very much to what you're saying. And then I know that you met somebody, and that was
Yeah.
kind of the turning point for you. Can you tell us about that part, after you're
Yeah.
struggling in the sales job and then you meet
Yeah.
this career counselor?
Yeah. So I was a very practical person. So I was not going to quit that pharmaceutical sales job until I knew what I was going to, until I had a plan, a better plan. So I just kept doing my job. But I was, as I say, I was reading books. I took a course, an adult ed course at a university, to learn about career exploration, to learn about career planning. I talked to a lot of people. But eventually I realized I need professional help. By this point, I had been promoted to downtown Toronto, and I thought, I am not figuring this out. And I'll say, like, through all of the self-assessments I was doing, so through all the exploration I was doing, it kept telling me, all the signs seemed to be pointing to, Sabrina, you like to help, you're a listener, you're caring, you like to do one-on-one work, you should be a therapist or a counselor. And again, I trusted myself. I knew that's important work. It's super important. The work that counselors, therapists, psychotherapists do is super important. But I absolutely knew that that was not my work. And so I just couldn't figure it out. So again, I thought, I need to take action here. So I went to see a career coach, and she charged, this is a long time ago, the exorbitant sum of $75 an hour, which I thought was crazy. And I said, well, I'll take one session. And I went to this session, and it was at the end of the workday. So it was sort of 5 o'clock. And I am earnestly pouring out my heart to her about, this is my job situation, and there's all these perks and these bonuses and these benefits, and I'm making money, but I'm miserable. So I'm pouring out my heart to her. And her body language, she's kind of leaning back in her chair, she's sort of listening. And at the end of my story, she lazily reaches over and she pulls this book off her shelf. This book won't mean anything to the young people, but it'll mean something. It was called What Color is Your Parachute? And it was kind of a classic guide for people who were trying to figure out their career. Well, I had read that book forwards, backwards, upside down, 6 ways to Tuesday, and I had a light bulb moment, which was, you are doing a crappy job. I am paying you good money, and that's the best you can come up with, is that I should read this book. And I had a light bulb moment. You're doing a lousy job. I could do a better job than you are. Wait a minute. I think I want to do your job. And intuitively, I knew that it ticked a lot of my boxes. It was helping, it was one-on-one, it was a lot of listening. And I just, and people have said to me, oh, Sabrina, you're so lucky. You're one of the lucky ones. You're one of the few fortunate ones because you had that light bulb moment. Most of us don't have that light bulb moment. But I would say that's like the musician who is an overnight success after 10 years of grinding it out in the small bars and clubs and kind of things. I did have a light bulb moment, but I had really, really worked for, and I'm going to say for years. Like, this was
Mhm.
not a 6-month process. I was working at this for, I'm going to say 3 years before, 4 years before I had that light bulb moment. And then it became clear to me what I needed to do. Just go get the credentials, and yeah, and start to do the work of helping people figure out, what is my career direction.
And the rest, as they say, is history. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
One of the things that I really liked about what you and it kind of maps onto some of the conversations that you and I have had, and many of us in the realm of career development or career coaching or assisting have, is for me, it really jumped out at me as you're describing. I'm a listener, I'm a helper, I'm caring, and those are the things also that probably served you extremely well as a skill set in pharmaceutical sales. And then it's pretty close to the casual observer. One could say that the skills that are required, 9/10 of the skills that are required to do well in sales, in a certain kind of sales, are also very close to the skills that are required to this work. And yet your feeling about them was worlds apart,
yeah.
about those
And
jobs.
and what does that track to? It tracks to values. It tracks to my own inherent values. And I would encourage others, so many great tools out there for any young person, anybody, to begin to understand, what is it that I truly value. So when we look at those things, you're absolutely right. It is a very similar skill set between being a sales rep for selling anything and doing some of the work I do as a career coach. It's listening, it's caring, it's hearing stories. But when I worked as a sales rep for the pharmaceutical company, it wasn't, to me, it didn't feel ethical. And it wasn't the kind of helping. It was, all I felt it was doing was helping the corporate bottom line, which I did not care about. And I didn't feel it was ethical. Whereas when I work with my clients, and I'm fortunate, they give me positive feedback saying, wow, this is really helping me to understand myself and to figure out my path going forward.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of thing I value, and that's meaningful for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And it's like what's happening in my brain right now is this idea of, so in Discover Year, we help students understand if they're a helper or if they like working with things. And there's some fairly basic rudimentary things that we're doing that are actually complicated for people who have never done them before. But we go through those things, and one of our objectives is, in this case, to identify, yes, I'm fundamentally a helper, for someone to put that suit on and say, this is gonna should be the focus of my job search, is helping people as a
Yeah.
step number one. The step number two is, there are how many buckets of helping, and they're each a bit different, right? And
Yeah.
there's some overlap. And so that exploration that you were talking about earlier, that is, there are multiple levels to it, which I think people don't ever really think about or talk about. It seems kind of overly simplified. You go try a bunch of stuff, but it's this combination of sometimes seemingly random attempts at new things, and other times a little bit more strategy to try things that seem to connect based on previous experience, right? So it ultimately, it can be confusing.
It can be very confusing. And, there's a word that I'm sure you use in your work when you speak with young people, and I do all the time, which is, especially when you're young, you're looking for clues. And that word clues is a tremendously important word because it's not always obvious, And so if I think about what clues do I have, it was clues like, I'm the person, if I'm sitting next to you on an airplane and you want to tell me about your vacation, I probably want to hear it. If you want to tell me your life story, I probably want to hear it. I don't know what that says about me, that I'm nosy or whatever, but I'm in the grocery store lineup or at the coffee shop, and I just like hearing people's stories. And that is, I'm saying that because it's a clue, because it's what I do every day in my work is I get to hear, I have the great privilege of hearing the stories from my clients. But I would say to young people is, when you're looking for that, is what are the small clues that, again, I would use that word to honor and respect, like I like to color code all the notes I take in my classes, and I like to organize my binder meticulously. And that's a clue, or potentially that's a clue. Someone will pay you to organize things. So notice those things, collect that information about yourself. Like, you want to put yourself under the microscope like you're a bug, and you want to study yourself like, how do I do in these situations, and what do I enjoy, and what resonates, and what lights me up, and what energizes me, and what's repulsive to me, and what is it that I never hope I never have to do again. All those things are clues, and it's like a big pool of information that at the beginning you won't be able to make any sense out of it. But if you keep working towards it, and keep studying it, eventually some recurring themes and patterns will emerge, and you can start to make your first steps. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I like the idea of the microscope and the bug. And I'm also curious to ask you about, so one common challenge that I'm sure you experience with some of your clients anyways is perhaps young people who are starting to understand these things about themselves, and then they might have a mother or a father who told them they were going to be a doctor or told them they were going to be a scientist. So I'm curious, and then what they find out about themselves is it defies that career path. So how did that go for you when you kind of came to this realization and perhaps you understood that you might that's in some way disappoint
Yeah.
your family? How did that go?
I guess I can only say for me it was a very primal. Like, it was like, if I'm going to survive and thrive as a human being, I can only
Mm.
pursue my path, my right path. And I just, on a very fundamental level, Jay, I understood that it would be a grave mistake to go in that direction that my father was. And he understood that. He was fine with that. I think really deep down, most parents really want their children to find a path that's a good fit for them. There are some exceptions to that, but yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. In my experience, what is often, and in fact, we have parents in our program who tell us that the interpretation that their young people had of what they said was so shocking to them. In other words, the parent doesn't ever feel like you have to do this. They don't feel like they're saying you have to become this or that, but the young person is interpreting their words that way. And sometimes the
Yes.
young person is absorbing messaging from all around that's not necessarily their parents, but that is telling the young person, this is how my parents want me to be.
Yeah.
And that can be overwhelming for some of them to try to break through. So I
Yeah.
think your story is inspiring that way. And I love seeing even just the concreteness or the motivation that you expressed now many years later about how obvious that was to you. And I hope that other people can feel that because I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'd love to hear a little bit now to just to transition, and I know that our students will likely have some more questions around this idea of how you evolved in your career. But you mentioned exercising. We like to talk. This is called Good Life Conversations. So we talk about career, and then we also talk, as you did, in your day, how do you integrate other things in your life that are meaningful? So you said you like to exercise. You mentioned gardening and cooking. So are there any other hobbies or pastimes that you've learned, and how do you like to go about doing those?
Yeah, I would say for me, the foundation is connecting with the important people in my life. So I don't care if I'm skiing or biking or gardening or standing over the back fence with my neighbors. It's connecting with important people in my life. I'm a big believer in community and friendships, and uh, if we can do that going on a ski together, that's great. And if we're sharing a meal or making food together, that's fantastic. But, there's a saying, Jay, I'm sure you've heard this, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your relationships. And I hold that to be true. And it's understanding that you need to nurture those friendships, those relationships. They take time, they take energy. And at different stages in our lives, that's hard. But man, it's worth it. I have gone through some really rough times in my life in the last few years, and you learn pretty quickly that those relationships, those relationships that you've nurtured, those people will be there for you. They will reassure you. They will make food for you. They will shovel your driveway. They will dry your tears. They will take care of you. And the reciprocal is also true. And that's the magic in life. Yeah.
You interestingly, well, the interesting things that we learn in doing endeavors like this series is I think you're the fourth person now who has specifically named relationship building or speaking with friends, communicating with, loved ones as a hobby. Uh, and
Yeah.
and and for each person, it sounds as though that was like an evolution to come to understand that that was the central thing. It wasn't about the activities or the things that we're doing. It was mostly those activities served to bring them together with other people. And so thank you for that. And I think that perhaps we can build on that to ask the question about relationships, which we always like to ask, which is what have you learned beyond the fact that they take work? Is there anything else that you've learned about relationships that you want to share?
Yeah, that there are relationships that nurture you and that are energizing, and then there are some relationships that you have to understand at some point, you have to let them go, and that's okay. It's difficult, it's hard. Sometimes you have to let them go, and you can have different boundaries, with different people. You only need to see them once every 6 months, maybe even once a year, and then there's other people, other relationships that I need to see on a really regular basis because they're so fulfilling and nurturing and nourishing, I would really say. But understanding that there can be an ebb and a flow. Yeah, yeah,
And just kind of understanding, maybe learning to, number one, that that's a thing, that there are various levels of friendships, perhaps, versus just seeing it as
yeah,
an all or nothing. And
exactly.
then sounds like perhaps you've kind of learned to navigate the emotions that come with that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that, no one friend is going to fulfill all of your needs. No one partner is going to fulfill all of your needs. And it's that whole beautiful range of friendships and relationships is one of the joys of life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that comes up a lot in our programming at Discovery Year. This, students are often express that they're going through a hard time or they're not seeing eye to eye with a friend, and they really struggle with that, especially at the age that they are, which is pretty
Yeah.
similar to a lot of your clients. So I think it's hopefully useful for them to hear, even though it's still hard in the moment, that you can take time away from people and understand that maybe you'll come back together, or that even though it seems to be such a natural connection, it's useful to think about it as putting work in to some degree, and to experience that putting in work with one person feels very different than putting in work with another person, and to
Yeah.
explore that. It's an important thing, I think, that we don't talk a lot about in society, but is really important to learn about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. Okay. Um, so we chatted a little bit about your job already, but is there a specific lesson beyond what we've chatted about that you would like to share with the students, specifically about work, a lesson that you've learned?
Um, I would say, particularly because, this is directed mostly at young people, is it's really normal and okay to not know your path, for there to be a lot of uncertainty, to not see it feels very confusing, it feels overwhelming, it feels unclear, and that's okay. That's normal. What's not okay is to be complacent about it, is to accept that. Well, the real message I'd like to communicate is you have to do something about it. It's not, there is not going to be any sign that is just revealed to you. You know, it's not just going to, and you're not going to, like, maybe you're going to backpack around Europe and it's just going to be revealed to you, but probably not. You know, you have to find a whole range of, I'm going to call them curated experiences, whether that's maybe travel is part of it, maybe volunteer is part of it, maybe taking one course at college or university is part of it, maybe talking to someone about their work is part of it, but to try a whole bunch of things to get clarity, and that informs your next step. So instead of like, I'm going to make a plan and I'm going to implement it, you know, that's, it sounds great in theory, but it doesn't usually work that way. It's we have to test and learn and reflect, and that informs our next step. And that iterative process is repeated for many, many decades. And that's in both your professional life and your personal life.
Yes. We just did a talk at a conference I just did the other day on test and learn versus plan and implement. So I'm right there with you. And it is had been remarkable to me over the last number of years, the percentage of people who are living today in this plan and implement phase. So it's really helpful for yet another person to say, hey, I didn't know it was a struggle, but a meaningful one. I hope that our audience takes that away, because of course it's true, but they don't hear that message often enough, I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, really quickly, we do travel in Discovery, or as you know, the students have a travel month and they like to talk about it. And they're, in fact, they're traveling now. As you mentioned, it's February. Do you have a favorite place that you've ever traveled, and tell us where it is? And if you can, tell us a little bit about why.
So it's not any exotic destination. My favorite place to travel is to a family cottage in the Laurentians that we share. And around the bay of this beautiful lake are a lot of families that are all connected, either through blood relations or just generations of having been there. And the feeling of family connection, clan, crew, community that comes from being around that bay. And it's the kind of situation where you can participate, or you can say, no, I just need to be quiet and read my book, or yes, I want to go and paddle at sunset with you, or yes, I want to play a tennis game, or maybe I want to hike with you, or maybe I just want to be alone. And generations of our family have grown up there, and it's again, I keep coming back to that same recurring theme that is at the core of who I am, is that it's about the people, the important people in my life. So, you know, I'm headed off to Costa Rica in April. I went to France last year and it was amazing. And I love those experiences and I wouldn't trade them for anything. But if I had to pick and I had to identify, it would be that cottage in the Laurentians. Yeah.
Such an interesting way to describe that feeling. What I'm hearing is, it's just an authentic community where you can make decisions based on how you're feeling, and people don't perhaps take offense. And
Yeah.
it sounds utopian. And I'm curious to know if you have any insight as to how did this community get to, because I think that's a feeling that's lacking a lot of times in our society. How did it get to that place where people are feeling that comfortable to be themselves?
Yeah, well, it's very intentional. It's very intentional of, you know, we're family, we're connected, we commit time and energy to nurturing these family connections, but not to be rose-colored, not to be too Pollyanna-ish about it, that there are bumps along the way, there's misunderstandings, there can be harsh words sometimes. There can be disagreements about how the cottage is to be shared and how time is to be spent. So it's not a smooth utopian path at all.
Mm.
It's real life with all its warts and bumps along the way, but it feels like a real bedrock at the in the best possible way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Anyways, that sounds very inviting to me. It's I am someone who values those difficult conversations, and have a propensity to have them more often than most people, because I see how beneficial they are. And I think that that's something that our students often are lacking, is that depth, in the world beyond social media, beyond the screens. They're lacking some of those experiences because they've been more confined, rather than out with other humans as much as
Yeah.
perhaps we were previously. So that's cool. That's cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, we're We're running just out of time now, so I'd love to ask you one final question, and that is always the same for our mentors. And so we call these good life conversations. The point is that life is not just about a job. It's not just about one friend. It's a complicated
Yeah,
journey that
yeah.
involve a lot of things. So if you were to share kind of some last words of advice with a group of people that were suggesting they go out and create a good life, what would you share with them?
I'm reiterating some of the things I've mentioned already, but it's that it's you can't be complacent. You can't expect it to just happen. You have to be intentional about it. If something isn't working, try something else. Read a book. Talk to a person, talk to an older person, volunteer, I would say to be relentless in that bias for action of trying things, experimenting, learning, testing, learning. And then I guess the way I'd finish up is, I never ever want to be naive and say that money doesn't matter. But I would say that one of my favorite sayings is the true currency of life is not money. The true currencies of life are time and love. And to invest wisely your time, your love, and to spend wisely. And that to think of time and love as the true currencies of life, that really resonates with me. And yeah,
Me too, and I've never heard that saying before, so thank you. And that will rattle around in my brain
yeah,
for a while, I am sure of it, but I really like it. So it's not to say that money does not matter because we live in a world where money is required, but it's not the most important thing.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Sabrina. Thanks for coming. As always, I had a blast chatting with you. We could go on much longer, but I know that our students will enjoy meeting you.
It was such a pleasure. And yeah, I look forward to meeting the students.
Thanks, and thanks to everyone who tuned in. This has been another Good Life Conversation. We look forward to seeing you at the next one.